I don't entirely agree with you that electric cars are boring. I think the fact that they are quiet and polite and
Yeah,
easy to drive
I'm
is
not
I don't,
against.
fantastic.
I don't
I'm
think
not
Richard
against
wants
him
to
in
be
any way.
quiet or polite.
No, I'm not against them
So
existing.
he's a
Honestly,
noisy bugger. That's part of the problem, I think.
I really.
What is the future of electric vehicles in the UK, and why is take-up so slow? Well, joining me now are probably the two best placed gearheads to talk about anything to do with cars. Let's welcome back to the show Richard Hammond and James May. Welcome to you both.
Good afternoon. Thanks
Good
for having us
afternoon.
on.
Well,
Nice to see you.
look, thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Richard, why are the sales of electric cars, in your view, failing to take off? The excitement about them has worn off. The sales are plummeting. What is it about electric cars that's not really catching on?
First of all, I think it's probably the same about anything new, isn't it? There's early adopters, and I can't remember the stat, James, you might, but there's something like 17% of people will be an early adopter. They'll go for something new, whether that's electric cars, hula hoops, air fryers, whatever it is. There's kind of that initial burst, and we all go, yeah, it's the best thing ever. They've done it. So there was always going to be a bit of a plateau. And then beyond that, anything new and novel comes along. Great, exciting. Early adopters adopt early and signal, in some instances, their wealth, because the first electric cars are very expensive. And once they've done that, then it's going to go quiet. Obviously, then there's supply problems, and we can get into the industrial issues, the problems with Vauxhall, etc. But just from a consumer point of view, I think the early adopters have adopted early.
James, is it, again, the infrastructure problem? The fact that actually for a lot of people, there aren't enough chargers on their street if they can't have one on their drive, or if they don't have a drive, there is still that fear of, what if I need to do a longer journey? Will I be able to charge enough? That range anxiety that actually is sort of a charger anxiety instead. Is that still a major factor, do you think, putting people off from electric vehicles?
I think so, yes. I mean, I have an electric car. I've had one for a long time, but I've got a driveway and a garage and all the rest of it. And I've also got a Porsche for when, it has to go a long distance. So I think for a lot of people living in cities, especially who are living in, say, old-fashioned terrace houses or flats and so on, the problems of charging are almost insurmountable and very off-putting. And that, coupled with the, on the whole, still quite high price of electric cars, means that people who simply have one car, which is most people, most households, I think, aren't quite prepared to risk it. And in a way, I don't entirely blame them. I agree with Hammond about the early adopters have adopted, and it's their job to push the technology forwards, like they did with digital cameras or VHS players, or in fact the car originally, back at the beginning of the 20th century.
Actually, can I jump in, Alexis? Because James and I hate to say it, we might agree here, which is going to be uncomfortable for all. But I've just had a thought, James. You know that happens rarely. Feel funny, but but we're going on about why aren't people adopting the electric car? Early adopters have done it, yes, but the electric car isn't finished yet. Far from it, in fact. If you mentioned adopting the car early on, right in the early days, it's not like everybody ran out and bought one. Most people thought they were mad, the work of the devil, and never going to catch on. And they weren't ready. The car of 100 years ago was not the car of today. Electric cars are, by and large, amazing, but they're not finished yet. Battery technology, the energy density issue, all of that, as well as the infrastructure, they're not done. So we've got to stop panicking. We've got this whole binary polarized message of, well, it's all going to be electric and you've got to get rid of petrol. We can't. That ain't ever going to happen yet. We're decades off that. In the meantime, there is new technology. Engineers are bringing out clever new things every week. Every single week there's new sodium batteries, are there not? There was a new material found the other week that can, without doing anything, absorb CO2, scrub CO2 from the atmosphere. So there's new stuff happening every week. What we need is a period of, I'm going to say, 20 years, when we all say, let's just do our best. Let engineering and science get on with resolving these problems, and we'll adopt things as they fit and suit us when they do.
So do either of you agree with the government that they want to ban that sale of new petrol vehicles by 2030? I mean, do you think that should be scrapped?
It was insane. It was never going to be achievable. It was never going to happen. Germany was the first to crumble, taking the rest of Europe with it. When they announced, thanks to pressure from Porsche, I believe, oh, all right, you can carry on making internal engine combustion cars if they can run on synthetic fuel. That's every car currently in production and every car ever made, because it can't yet be done. It was too much too early.
Yeah, it was. And I also think that the government has a very bad track record of interfering with motoring and the car industry. I mean, it wasn't that long ago they were telling us all to buy diesels because that was the correct thing to do. And now they're telling you shouldn't have one. So I'm a big fan of letting the market decide. The fact is, electric motors are the ideal way to power cars. We've known that for over 100 years. The issue is storing the electricity, the battery technology, basically, which isn't good enough yet for most people. It will come when it's had as much development work as the internal combustion engine has had, but it's not there yet. So I don't think it should be pushed too hard. I think people who do adopt electric cars, on the whole, or the people I know anyway who have done it, which is quite a few, they like them. And I think once you've tried one, you will be impressed and you will hope that you can have one pretty soon. So I sort of believe the market will sort itself out.
I do slightly disagree. Brilliant.
Oh, go on then. Finally.
Well, I don't like them. They're boring. I really don't. And I'm very happy.
Have you not got one, Richard?
I've had a couple and I sold them because I was just really bored. I love the analog nature of an engine that runs on explosions. And bearing in mind, the internal combustion engine never damaged anything. It was the fuel. Synthetic fuel does exist. It just needs to be scaled up. Totally fossil-free petrol that you drop into your car as it is with no changes, and more importantly, distribute over the existing and long-standing infrastructure is already there. If people like JLR, they're not doing it now, but they were going to throw 4 billion, wasn't it, at a battery gigafactory on technology that isn't yet there. Instead, they should have spent 1 billion on developing that technology. Yes, absolutely, because electric cars categorically shall be part of our future. If they'd spent the remaining 3 billion on scaling up synthetic fuel production, 1.6 billion cars currently on the road could remain on the road whilst we sort out the future.
James, we inevitably always have the hydrogen question come up. I'm not quite sure whether you do or don't still have a hydrogen car, if you ever did, but I thought I read that you did.
I did. I've had two actually, but I don't have one anymore because it became unusable in its primary role as a car.
Right.
Because it became almost impossible to refuel it because the number of hydrogen stations shrank to, well, effectively nothing. It's a shame because I think that technology it has promise. We've known about it for a long time. Actually, the fuel cell predates the internal combustion engine. But it's not a decarbonize the car solution. It's a big picture solution, hydrogen. It has to be for everything, all energy, shipping, aviation, domestic, steel making, everything. The car would merely piggyback on the back of it. The great advantage of battery electric vehicles is, Hammond was talking about the infrastructure for delivering liquid fuels and how synthetic fuels could make use of that. Well, in fact, the national grid has been there for a very long time, since about 1924, I think, and that is a perfect infrastructure for delivering electricity.
But it can't deliver it in sufficient quantities.
Well, not yet, but it's.
You need nitrogen-fueled cables about 1 foot in diameter.
Yes.
Think of the carbon footprint of grubbing up and relaying new cables and the concrete involved in that. If you turned every petrol station in the country into a charging station, the carbon footprint of that would last thousands of years and would have to sit on the shoulders of everybody using it.
Yes, but you're assuming that the advances in technology that we've said will affect things like batteries won't affect things like the national grid. It has been rewired several times since its inception. So I'm not worried. I don't entirely agree with you that electric cars are boring. I think the fact that they are quiet and polite and easy to drive.
I don't
think Richard wants to be quiet or polite.
No, I'm not against them existing.
He's a noisy bugger. That's part of the problem.
I enjoyed them. I enjoyed the ownership of them, and I totally get in some applications for some people. I have no problem. Fill your boots. They're great. They're not for me. I'd rather run my '68 Mustang, and I'd rather run it with a clear conscience, which I can, with fossil-free fuels. That's already there. So I don't know why we all get hot under the collar. I really don't. That's what's ridiculous. Maybe it's been politicized because it's a good thing to shout about. We're going to save the planet. Well, why don't you get rid of fast fashion person first.
Right.
Stop making clothes out of fossil fuel derived products,
Well,
and use
I
it
think
instead
that's
to
part
power
of the
my
problem.
Mustang.
Part of the problem with the electric car is it's not actually designed to save the world. It's designed to save the car.
Yeah, and the
It
car
makes the
industry,
whole
and it's
issue
struggling.
more complicated. So we have to
Yes.
regard them as cars first, not political statements or
Yeah.
part of a bigger campaign to seek redemption for humanity.
I think I would quite happily have you two sit here talking amongst yourselves and me just listening in and everybody else, because it is fascinating, but we've sadly run out of time. But before we go, one quick question for both of you. Jaguar have changed their logo, getting rid of the Jaguar. Are you upset? Are either of you upset about that? James, are you upset about that?
No, they haven't entirely got rid of the Jaguar. They're still going to have it somewhere on the flanks of the car.
Yeah.
I think that the problem for Jaguar for a long time is that everybody believes it's about Jaguar heritage and tradition and British racing green and the E-Type and so on, but that clearly didn't work. They turned into not much more than a cottage industry. So it does need a bit of a rethink. Now, I find the ad a little bit...
There's no cars in it.
There are no cars in it. But I also wonder if it might be a massive joke by Jaguar's branding people. I think they might have released that, then they'll surprise us with something else. What we need to see is the car.
Right. Richard, some people are accusing them of going woke. Is that what's happening?
I can't
E-Type
agree.
alert,
I kind of
E-Type
no.
alert.
I've got 6 Jags now, old ones with growlers on the front, as they call the badge. I think they've either been utterly brilliant or complete idiots, and only time will tell.
Look, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure, as always, to have you on the show. I hope we get to do it all over again when the next row about electric cars comes up again. Richard Hammond, James May, thank you for your time. Well, that's it. That's our show done. Thank you for all your messages and